Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to all of you to our debate with the ICANN CEO Göran Marby. Today's debate is hosted by our steering committee member, Marina Kaljurand, who is an MEP with the S&D Group from Estonia and a member of the European Parliament Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. Marina served as Estonian Foreign Affairs Minister and Ambassador and is Commissioner and former Chair of the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace. Welcome, Marina. Thank you very much for hosting this debate on our forum, which is part of the EIF Meet the CEO series, as we like to call it. So I will leave you the honor to introduce our special guest of today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Maria, Rosa, thank you so much for your kind introduction. It's always a pleasure to be part of the EIF family. And it's especially good to know that we have excellent and exceptional people talking to us and meeting us. And today I'm really proud to introduce and present President and CEO of ICANN, Göran Marby. I don't know how much ICANN needs. Hi, Göran. I don't know how much ICANN needs introduction to this community, but I'll say very briefly that they were established in 1998. And since then, they have coordinated unique identifiers across the world via promoting competition and developing policies. And what do they say about themselves? They describe themselves as a not-for-profit partnership of people from all over the world dedicated to keeping the internet secure, stable, and interoperable. I have the privilege and honor of knowing Göran now for a number of years. I like him. What do I like most about him? He has technical background, but he can speak and talk about technical questions in the language that normal people understand him. And trust me, it's not very common among IT people and technical people. I appreciate it very much. Göran has been the president and CEO of ICANN since 2016. Before that, he has a distinguished career of 20 years experience as a senior executive in the internet and technology sector, as well as a leader as Director General at the independent regulatory body Swedish Post and Telecom Authority. Yes, he's Swedish and he resides in LA. Before that, Göran founded and served as CEO of AppGate, a Swedish security software company, which he grew to a global company with customers in 35 countries, including operations in US. And I can continue. But I also tried to find something personal about Göran. Not much was out there on internet. He knows how to hide things. But he's happily married with 3 kids, and he had birthday a couple of days ago. So Göran, congratulations. I also like very much his blog, President's blog, which he's having on the ICANN website. And I have to say that I looked more precisely into 2 of his blogs. The one which he posted in December last year, which was an overview of ICANN's efforts regarding the GDPR and expectations for 2021. And the second were the goals for fiscal year 2021, which means that it started July last year and will end June this year. There are altogether 10 goals. 6 of them are developed by Göran and 4 are developed by the board. And Göran, I understand yours very well. Just for those who haven't seen the goals, I'll remind. Goal number 1, define and implement a phased plan to return to face-to-face meetings. I love it. I think we are all tired of Zooming and Teamsing and doing all those video conferences. We need, like AA Group, we need to do it peacefully in a slow mode so that our feelings will not be hurt. So step by step back to normality. I also liked very much goal number 2, to implement a common strategy for internet governance and technical internet governance. So, dear guests, it is my honor and privilege to present Göran Marby, President and CEO of ICANN. I'm looking forward to our discussion today. After Göran's introductory remarks, we have question and answers session. And now it will be miracle. I disappear and he appears on the full screen. Welcome, Göran.
I don't think that it's a miracle that you disappear and I appear. I don't know if that's a good thing either. Thank you very much, Marina, my friend. I'm very happy that I'm on camera, and I hope you can't see the fact that I'm blushing. You're very nice to me. So, I mean, thank you anyway for hosting me today. We are in the middle of an ICANN meeting. And it's actually the last day of an ICANN meeting. So this happened to happen during a very interesting time for ICANN. But I think I'm going to start a little bit of talking about ICANN, because I would like to, even if you know it, I would like to remind you about something. ICANN is in many ways, and I usually call it, either we have two pillars or we are one tree with 2 branches. And one of those branches is what we often talk about, is the policy making process for new TLDs. I'm going to come back to that a little bit, but I would like to share just a minute about the other thing we do, which is our technical work. Every time you go online, regardless of which device you're using, which kind of network we're using, regardless of where you are in the world, you hit about something that originates from ICANN. And that's what we do. We provide the world with all identifiers, and especially the DNS identifiers, which is the way that internet connects to each other, or internet user connects to each other. We do that as a non-for-profit organization, California-based, and I'm speaking to you from my home in LA, and many of you is probably in your homes as well. But it's important to remember, when I speak about things like security and stability and those things, it has a very practical meaning for us. The way technically you meet us is by the way that you may have heard about the concept of root servers, which is an important part of the infrastructure of the internet. ICANN is its technical mission to actually update the root servers. The information comes from us. It's one thing that I think has been quite remarkable over this year is how well the internet has worked. You know, when we all went into this a year ago, it was. I remember when I left my office back in the end of February, beginning of March, and I thought to myself, I won't be here for maybe 3 or 4 months. I actually visited my office for the first time in almost a year, just a couple of weeks ago, and I realized that there were still things lying on my desk there. I didn't foresee, and nobody really foresaw what's going to happen with this year. But one thing has been constant, and that is this unique resource has worked very well for us. I mean, we have connected, we have used it. We have, anything from government, civil society, business, everything has been working together, and it's been worked very well. Technology has been stable. And I think it shows also the importance that when it comes to something like internet, we all have to work together. It's not something, when ICANN, for instance, if you look at our policy work, we often are perceived that people are coming to us for any decision that happens. But when it comes to our policy work, for instance, we work together with our partners in the numbers community, or colleagues in our numbers community, who sets the policy for distribution of IP addresses around the world, or our colleagues in the country code operator space, who makes the decision on a country base when it comes to the policies for country code operators. What I'm trying to say, or the IETF, who makes the technical standards for the internet space. What I'm trying to say that ICANN is one part of an ecosystem who makes this happen. You also have the telecom operators, you have the providers of information. In a unique way, all this actually worked during this period where literally everything went online. And it just shows to me the importance of working together. I mean, another thing that I think has been interesting this year from our perspective is that it's fair to say that internet is now part of society. I mean, it's used for society, by society, within the society, and so many things got connected. And of course, what we see that is an increased interest from legislators and politicians about what happens on the internet, and that's very, very good actually, because it can help to prevent some of the things we don't like. We are a technical organization. We don't take stances in when it comes to policies or politics, but we do have views when it comes to, for instance, the ability for people to connect around the internet. But it's also that creates a lot of misconceptions about what the internet actually is, and we do spend a lot of time trying to define what we believe is our mandate, what is the internet as we see it, etc., etc. And just to give you some examples, in many of the discussion that happens today about fake news or abuse of systems doesn't happen on the internet at all. It's often discussed in what we call platforms. I don't take any. I mean, I'm using most of those platforms that I'm talking about now by myself. So you have Facebook, you have Google, you have Netflix, you have HBO, and a lot of them. But you should know that when you go into these platforms, you actually do leave the internet. You literally walk into someone else's computer, and they now control your environment. So for us, that's not the internet. So when I talk about the internet, well, I'm not talking about the platforms. Another thing that we often talk about is that, and I hope you don't take offense about this, but the word cyber. The word cyber often means that it's sort of out there somewhere, but it's not. I usually define cyber as information stored in another jurisdiction. All information is always stored on someone's computer. The notion of a cloud computing, for instance, is probably just a computer in your neighbor's garage. Everything on the internet is always stored in a computer somewhere. So that's the kind of discussions we often have. I mean, our mandate, and why do we do that? Because our mandate is to ensure the stability, security, and the resilience of the domain name system, or the DNS. So it continue to allow thousands of networks across the globe to interconnect. I mean, it's kind of, I think that if I look back, as Marina pointed out, I'm getting old. But if I look back, I was 30 years old before I sent my first text message on a mobile phone. Well, it feels like yesterday, but it's actually about a lot of years ago. And if you see the technical advancements that happened to you, how fast we just adopted this technology. I mean, when I was, before I was 30, if someone told me that I will be heavily depending on something, a technical network where I can go anywhere in the world and connect to, I wouldn't even think about it. Why would I need that? But now it has an integral part of what we do, and it's gone very fast and almost creeps up on us. But it continues to evolve. It continues to change, and it continues to challenge ourselves how we do things. If there's any message I would like to give for in the speech, really is about that we have to continue to evolve. We have to continue to discuss. We have to do it together. From the ICANN perspective, I mean, some people, when I describe what ICANN does, they always say, "How did you end up doing this?" Yeah, that's a good question. We were formed by a green paper, as it's called, from the US government. But in that, it was said we have to be very transparent, we have to be very open, and we have to have what we call a multi-stakeholder model behind us to make sure that we don't lose sight of what we're supposed to do. And if I think about what we really try to do is about keeping the internet a trusted resource for everybody. And another thing, a reflection I'm doing over the last year, is the discussion about what is called abuse. I'm at the end of an ICANN meeting right now when different forms of abuse is being addressed, and it's an interesting concept because it's always a little bit hard to define. Because there could be ramifications that are interesting for it. I mean, easily said, when in the ICANN world, when you talk about abuse, there are sort of two different versions. One of them, when you use domain names for abuse, and the other one is when you actually abuse the DNS system. And one of the things we've said, unfortunately, over the last couple of years, is an increased threat to the DNS system as itself. being technical for a second, when we through IANA delegate a top-level domain to someone, we mean that we delegate it and create a kingdom for someone else, which is the intent. That's why that's how to be done. But so when we talk about threats to the DNS system, we often talk about the delegated part, the top-level domain operators. And unfortunately, we've seen over the last couple of years, we have seen top-level domain operators completely taken over by bad actors. And when that happens, nothing using that top-level domain, that extension, is now secure. Nothing. You can't trust the routing, you can't trust the email, you can't trust anything. So that is something that we do spend a lot of resources of working with our colleagues, the other top-level domain operators, to make sure that doesn't happen. The other thing is when you're using the DNS for abuse, and then there is often, now under COVID, for instance, what we saw that there was a lot of what we call speculative registrations around the world in different top-level domains using the word COVID-19. We tracked that. Good thing is that we realized that through the protective things that we already have in place in ICANN, most of them didn't become active, or if they became active, they were taken down very fast. I think it was 70,000. So we follow and track about 250 million domain names in our systems, and we have like 60, 70,000 COVID-19 speculative registrations. And in the end, I think we figured out 300 or 400 of them that were actually used for bad actors, and they were taken down immediately. But we do this not by ourselves. We do this with a lot of other ones, and some of those things, when it comes to abuse, can have legislative. I sometimes think about this. What is one person's spam could be another person's marketing effort. What is for someone is illegal content could be someone's way of screaming for help through an email because they are under oppression. It's very hard. And some of the discussions we're having, and this is core, again, why it's so important to have conversations with governments as well, is that it could have an infringement on trademark laws, freedom of speech laws, and all those things. I mean, no one in this area are interested in fraudulent websites to try to sell non-existing or fake products, child exploitation, human trafficking, cyberbullying, and hateful speech and stuff. But also knowing that this is not. I mean, if things are illegal in real life, they are illegal on the internet, and vice versa. That's always good to remember. And I would like to take the opportunity to comment the European institution for the efforts they are undertaking to maintain the trust of the internet when it comes to those things. And by the way, if you still hear me, Marina, congratulations for the recent conclusions of the regulation on preventing the dissemination of terrorist content online, and for your contribution over the years during your tenure in Estonia. So our relationship with governments and legislators and other ones is often that we provide technical advice. And what is technical advice in our world? It's often when, for instance, when we try to tell, we don't take, we try not to take a position on the legislation as itself, the policy itself. What we're trying to do sometimes is to engage in such a way that we can tell that this legislation might have an effect on the ability for people's ability to connect to the internet itself. I can give you the cookie legislation from Europe as an example, where we saw that we have no stake in the discussion, but the way it was written, it can actually prevent people from connecting to the internet because you had to accept certain things before you actually got connected. I mean, if you can't get connected, you can't actually you can't say yes or no to something. So that's the areas where we try to intervene. It's hard sometimes to make the difference between it's hard sometimes to be seen being technical, because it often becomes a political discussion. I mean, one thing that I know you're going to ask us, what I want to talk about is the so-called WHOIS. To give you a background of what it is, I mean, the WHOIS system is a telephone book. It's the easiest way to describe it, where the registrants, the buyer of a domain name, through our policies, has to put in data by themselves. So it's very unlike any other types of databases in that sense that it's not a commercial entity that holds their customer names or uses it for billing or anything else. It's telephone directory, and it was intent from the beginning to describe what we call the technical endpoints of the internet. If something happened, we should be able to contact them. Of course, this was in the beginning. We'd had very few domain names, and now we have more than 250 million in our WHOIS systems. By the way, the RERs have their own. It's the reason why we have the same name for different things is actually because it's a technical protocol, which is called the WHOIS protocol, which is now going to replace with another protocol. We have decided to call the WHOIS systems anyway, but it is and also, of course, the country code operators have their own WHOIS systems. The European Commission has one under EURID, the .eu. They have a WHOIS system as well. So, which ICANN doesn't have any influence on whatsoever, of course, and should it have? But it's good to understand that it started as a telephone directory. The information comes from the people who actually who buys domain names. It's not a commercial one. It's actually excluded. You can't use it for commercial use. And over the years, it's become something that is important for law enforcement, for intellectual property, for other ones who search the WHOIS databases for bad actors, or if they see a website with fraudulent content. GDPR had the effect that we had a very good cooperation with the European Commission and the data protection authorities after the implementation of GDPR, which made it possible for actually to have the WHOIS system. Remember that ICANN, as a legal entity, ICANN.org, as we call it, a California-based non-for-profit, doesn't have a usage of the data. We have some limited uses for it, but we can't access it because technically it belongs to all the contracted parties, as we call them, the registrars and the registries around there, but they have to maintain the databases technically. So we don't have one WHOIS database, it's 2,500 of them around the world. Some of them bigger, some of them are smaller, depending on how many top-level domain names they have. So we had a very good help from the Data Protection Authority, the Data Protection Board, and the European Commission, leading up to that we can actually maintain the WHOIS database, despite it was hard to explain why ICANN.org wanted it. You have to find the purpose of the database a little bit different. But the one of the things that happened was that the information is still there, but you can't see all that information. So a part of that information is now not visible for everybody to see. You have to go through the process. And because of technicalities in the law, it's the contracted parties, as we call them, the registrars and registries, who makes that what we call the balancing test. They have to make an assessment about if this information is legal to be sent out. And here comes one of the interesting aspects of that, is that because has no commercial value for our contracted parties. They have no, actually, if it wasn't for policies set by ICANN, the information wouldn't exist in the first place. They definitely don't use it for billing. They definitely don't use it for emailing their customers, etc., etc. They maintain the databases because we asked them to do that. So there's always a risk for a contracted parties legally to give out data. The ICANN community has worked very hard for the last couple of years to try to figure out a way of coming around that. I mean, we cannot in any way figure out a system that circumvents the basics of the law that who makes the decision about the balancing test. But what we are in the process of looking at right now from a community perspective is to build a system where it simplifies for the requester of that information. It will be technically interesting to try to build it because no one has built anything like this before, especially when it comes to the identification of the requester. But it's also good to know that I know there are some disappointments in it, but I want to point out we are trying to make a system that is not intelligent in that sense, because it's in the end the law provides it's the law who says that the decision has to be made by the contracted body. We actually we had a proposal to make like ICANN.org the legal entity legally responsible for this. We have asked numerous questions to the Data Protection Board and also to the European Commission if that was possible to make ICANN or a legal entity legally responsible for the balancing test, but that didn't help. We didn't get that. What we have instead, which I want to thank you for, is the new proposals in IS2, which we hope can help some of those problems for the contracted parties to make it easier for them to do a balancing test. Some problems will still be there. I'm technical now for like international data transfer, etc. But I hope that we can work with the European Commission and the legislators to make that easier because it's been interesting that this is a European legislation, but we also have a request from the European Commission and other ones the importance of this information. It's like a balancing act between privacy and the right to privacy and the need for information. I truly believe that belongs with the legislators. That particular question belongs to you in the Parliament, to the European Commission, and other ones. ICANN, as a technical organization, has problem coming up with that answer. I think that I hope that I will receive some questions. I want to leave over time for questions as well. But maybe I just want to end this thing is that the other thing if the first message I try to do is that we need to work together. We need to continue to evolve this internet together with the ecosystem, which I mentioned, and I guess some of them will be on this call, we are a part of. But there is also, you should know that internet is not done. And it's not like everybody now around the world agree that the interoperability of one system is a good thing, because we continue to see proposals that would actually change how internet works and disconnect people from it. And often they now come up in forest that is a little bit outside where we normally go. There are provisions in 5G that will make it harder for internet users to get access to information. There are, I don't know if you heard about the proposal from Huawei that talks about something called the new IP, which is a complete rewrite on how we do things with a higher. It's a little bit hard to understand from a technical perspective what they actually try to do, but it definitely means a much more potential intervention from governments when it comes to who could be online and what can be posted online. Some of us play this, when you go to conferences, you play this bingo. And one of the bingo words I'm always looking for is when they call it the non-best offered internet, implying that what we call the best effort, which is a technical term, by the way, that could replace with something much more robust. I think it's important to protect, and I think I'm speaking for some of my colleagues in this system. I know in Europe you have RIPE, you have NetNode up in North and other ones who works with this, is that it's so very, very, and of course the country code operates. It's important to continue. The model have served us well to build a system that is so resilient, so secure, and actually works so well. And we should make sure that we continue to do that, because otherwise we could disconnect people from this thing we call the internet, which I don't think is a good thing. I personally don't think it's a good thing. So thank you very much for this, and I now open up for questions.